Okay, so Ariana Grande went on this podcast called Pop Crushed, co-hosted by Penn Badgley. Didn't even know he had a podcast, but co-hosted by Penn Badgley. And she opened up about her relationship to child stardom. And then towards the end, started talking about, touched on the Nickelodeon stuff. She doesn't mention Dan Schneider and doesn't mention any like specific names of bad individuals who were around at this time. But the reason that I want to play this is because when we were having this conversation about Quiet on Set, and when more actors had come forward who were not necessarily in the documentary, a lot of people were like, where's Ariana Grande? Where's Victoria Justice? And it was like, what do you mean? What do you mean, where are they? Well, why aren't they saying anything? Why aren't they coming out with statements? Like, you don't get to dictate. You don't get to dictate who needs to speak and when they need to speak and what they need to say. And it's clear here in watching just Ariana briefly touch on this that she was processing everything, which is what happens. Okay? And sometimes you think you've processed it and then you process more and you don't feel ready to talk about something, and it can take a really long time before you've thoroughly processed it to come to terms with something having been bad. So we should never ever treat any victims as like, you have to behave a certain way. You have to do it on a certain timeline. You have to like come forward on a certain timeline. And we also, like, for a lot of people, we don't know their stories because they haven't said them.
Maybe I misheard, I'm not sure, but did you say that you created Victorious, or that you were
Also, she looks
in
so
conversation with the creator of that before?
No, auditioned for.
Okay.
Victorious with Liz Gillies.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were on no, did I say green?
No.
No.
I was just trying to understand.
He was thinking about the Roche Point.
The Roche Point.
I was already on Saturn's Rings.
Yeah.
And I was just like, right.
Showrunner.
No, but I guess because I
had auditioned with Liz, who was in 13
okay,
with me.
that's
So
what it was.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
we like flew to LA together, all green and nervous and wondering what the chances were. And we both got cast. So I was lucky to have my first 2 jobs be with my 2 best friends. Like my first one was Aaron and my second one was with Liz. And that was very lucky.
So you were talking before about the kind of community that that being on in a stage production or a TV show provides. I mean, that was for me, you know, I think the thing that actually drew me to it more than anything. For you, it sounds like there was also a really, really clear, strong, like, you know, I want to sing. Music is the future for you. Music is the path. But I guess I'm curious, what was that like? Because again, this is, how old were you? 14?
I was 14, and I flew out to audition with Liz Gillies for Victorious, and we were all very excited, and we got cast, and it was the best news we could hear. I mean, we were young performers who just wanted to do this with our lives more than anything, and and we got to, and that was like so beautiful. I think we had some very special memories, and we feel so privileged to have been able to create those roles and be a part of something that was so special for a lot of young kids. I think we're reprocessing our relationship to it a little bit now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely.
What are your thoughts on child acting? Like, we've had different child actors on the show who feel differently. Some who are like, I would never let my kids. I don't think anyone should. And others who are open to it as long as there's like certain conditions on set.
Obviously, my relationship to it has and is currently and has been changing, and I'm reprocessing a lot of what the experience was like. You know, my I think that the environment needs to be made safer if kids are going to be acting. And I think there should be therapists. I think there should be parents allowed to be wherever they want to be. And I think not only on kids sets, I think if anyone wants to do this or music or anything at the level of exposure that it means to be on TV or to do music with a major label or whatever, there should be in the contract something about therapy is mandatory twice a week or thrice a week or something like that. And I was actually talking to Max Martin about this the other day because he was always such an amazing person to talk to about the stressful parts of what I was experiencing. Yeah. And he was just amazing. But a lot of people don't have the support that they need to get through performing at that level at such a young age, but also dealing with some of the things that the survivors who've come forward, and there's not a word for how devastating that is to hear about.
Kept Nice, thank you for 11 months. I wish that people who threw their energy into saying we need to protect kids, but protect kids from like the LGBTQ community, I wish they would throw their energy into protecting kids this way, of like trying to implement these changes in Hollywood or in digital content creation to protect children that way. It's like, you want to protect kids? Here's a way to do it. Why don't you focus yourself on this rather than directing your energy towards drag queens who are doing a theatrical story hour, or there being rainbows in the classroom during Pride Month, like just kids being taught acceptance and tolerance. And it's because they don't actually want to protect kids. I mean, okay, look, I think that there are politicians, that there are people in power who use this fear to garner up support for their base, but there are people who believe this. There genuinely are. They believe that the LGBTQ community is a threat. And where do you think they're getting that from? Where do you think those ideas are being drilled into their heads? You always have to remember that people who benefit from a mass group of people believing this thing are the ones who are getting them to believe that thing. That's where it comes from. So it riles up voters in this country. They go and vote for said politician who is who is spewing all this shit, who is making them believe all this shit, and then who is saying, I'm going to be the one to bring an end to this. And it's not to say that there isn't a baseline of homophobia with a lot of people, but that's like, it's being fed into. Are you saying it's a self-fulfilling prophecy? I guess so. I guess, yeah, where like there are those feelings there. The people who benefit from from taking advantage of it and from further whipping it up into this like now huge societal problem are going to continue doing so. I read something recently about how evil basically is a byproduct of idealistic fanaticism. I think that's basically why people are LGBTQ, because they legit do not. Oh, I was like, whoa, what? Why people are against LGBTQ, because they legit do not think it is. They legit do not think it is not good moral, when in fact that belief at its core is just false. Sorry, I can't fucking read, because they legit do think it is not good and moral, when in fact that belief at its core is just false. Right. So there are obviously people in this country who are anti-LGBTQ for like religious reasons. But as far as this culture war, as far as the directed attacks on drag queens, on on pride being taught in schools. Like there are things happening right now that have been worsened by media, by right-wing media and politicians latching on to this culture war and using it as using it as the foundation of their party, of like what they run on. And so anyway, we're getting into something a little bit different, but I just it's like, so when I say, man, I really wish these people would put that energy into protecting children, like really protecting children, and here's something where children need to be protected in. One can only hope. For fear-mongering, they must do the fear-mongering they must do in order to garner support and a base. They just prey on people's fear, misunderstanding, doomerism. They create boogeyman so they can be the savior that people are looking for. Yeah, they benefit from it. And look, it's not anything new. Like, you look back on Reagan's era. Reagan was the war on drugs guy. You know, he was very effective at fear-mongering and being the guy who was going to restore this country to normalcy, that we were going to be good wholesome Christians. Yeah, Reagan thought AIDS was divine retribution. Absolutely.
And so I think the environment just needs to be made a lot safer all around.
Yes,
and like I said, I'm still in real time processing my relationship to it. But the beauty.
Okay, so Ariana Grande has now said 3 times that she has been reprocessing her relationship to when she was a young actress on the set of Nickelodeon and was obviously subjected to creepy ass shit. And so this is just an example of, hey, not everybody needs to speak when you or should speak when you think that they should speak. Like, trauma and injury that comes from our past takes time to understand and to process. And there's no set timeline on it.
Beautiful thing about it was that Liz and I got to fall in love with these characters that we created and learn what it feels like to be so in a character that you can't, separate yourself from it. And there were things like that, but the rest of it is still being worked on.
Definitely. I mean, I think it's not just in Hollywood, and it's not just on like certain sets. It's undoubtedly true that anybody who's going to be a really professional, competent, experienced, technically like veteran performer by the time you're in your like 20s, you have to have been doing it for a long time. And I don't think there's anybody who's gotten there who hasn't experienced, all these degrees of what you should and could call exploitation. But as you're going through it, it's not just that one thing. There's a million layers to it.
Right.
And you can find, and as a person who then depends to some degree, not depends is not the right word, because I'm saying this for myself as well, like, the greatest burden and the greatest gift of my life is being a like high-level professional performer. You know what I mean? Like, I have some of the most spiritual moments of understanding and insight and mercy and compassion when I'm in the middle of it. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't been doing it for so long. You know what I mean? And so it's like it takes and it gives. There's a lot to it, and I think the way that as you said, I mean, devastating is a great word to describe the things that are coming to light now. It doesn't. it doesn't mean that it was all. It's just like across the board a negative experience for everybody who's doing it, and I think that's a really complicated and strange.
It changes
truth
it
to
a
sit
lot.
with.
Yeah.
It changes it a lot, and that's what I think I'm reprocessing.
Me too,
Yeah.
by the way. Like I wasn't around. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot there.
I'm sorry. It's really tricky because also you and I, if I've gathered anything from our time together and from today and from this, from just knowing you, it's we're so professional. So
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like in any work environment. I'm glad that this conversation is happening here and also in the world, because it's also just kind of a cultural shift
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
happening
Yeah.
where it's not just actors and
No,
singers and whatever. If you ask anyone who's ever worked ever, if they've ever been sort of like, dealt with a boss that had a really bad ego and temper and whatever, or if they've been sexually harassed or even assaulted, or it's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
It's like
I mean, statistically, it's prevalent. I think
Yeah,
it's just
it's prevalent.
We point the finger a lot and fail to often remember, like, this behavior is prevalent. It's it's a
we're
norm.
used to. We're told it's normal.
Yeah.
And it's changing, and I think that's a really nice place to see the world in unison,
Yeah.
standing in a place where we're like, that's changing.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable. So yeah. I
Yeah.
think yes.
One of
Yes.
my favorite quotes. I Sophie and Penn will agree with this. I have like a fire and brimstone personality too.
Yeah. So the Me Too movement has not accomplished total parity and broken down the power structures that have allowed this behavior to exist forever. But what it has led to is a shift in society and the conversations that are had that used to not be had. And that's why I stress over and over again that no movement leads within a X amount of years to the change that it's fighting for. But what it does is like opens the door to having to welcoming in this change and to having these conversations. The shift has been a long time coming. It's far from over, but I'm glad it's happening. Yeah. But that's why it's like it's something where as these conversations are had more, as people are more aware and they have the language and the understanding to discuss this systemic abuse and the way power is wielded by those at the top, it's like we have to keep acknowledging and recognizing when powerful abusers still are around. Where it's like, okay, so you know what we've been talking about? Yeah, that's an example of it. And we can't just have like a veneer of there having been change of like, oh, well, well, at least this thing happened, or they lost out on this job, but it's like, but they still are a part of this though. And I'm sorry, the Jonathan Majors Perseverance Award, I just can't get over
I'm
it.
like, let the
Two?
punish
What's the other part?
only exclusively. But I'm like, I want people to be like punished. So anyway, this quote is very fire and brimstone, but I love it. But there's a quote that says, "Children are a trust which no community can neglect with impunity." And I think about that a lot. Like, what does that mean? Like, who's harmed when you neglect children? The children, but also the community, the adults that don't show appropriate behavior towards children. And I feel like what's worse in the film industry maybe or more amplified is like a spirit of adult behavior towards children. What I've gathered from interviewing a lot of our guests who started as children is that there's like two phenomena that are common. One is like infantilizing people, treating people who aren't children like children, and then treating children like adults,
Right.
expecting adult behavior from them, or acting in ways, or like letting children be exposed to things that like they're not developmentally ready for.
No.
Yeah.
That's
That's really
It's really well
upsetting.
put.
Yeah. And there's also a strange pattern that occurs where it's really taken advantage of how much it means to the young performer to get a laugh from Video Village.
Yeah.
You're like, oh
Yeah.
shit, like I'm doing something great. Like this is funny. This is good. And
By the way, Video Village, we should say, is where all of the producers and the director are watching the monitors of like what's being captured on camera.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think that was, speaking specifically about our show, I think that was something that we were convinced was like the cool thing about us, is that like we pushed the envelope with our humor, and the innuendos were like we were told and convinced as well.
This is the whole, oh, it's not actually inappropriate, it's edgy. You guys are doing stuff that no one else has done. Like don't be don't fall prey to thinking that there's something wrong with what we're doing here, that you feel uncomfortable because it's inappropriate. It's just because we're edgelords.
Oh, that it was like the cool differentiation. And I don't know, I think it just all happened so quickly, and now looking back on some of the clips, I'm like, that's
Bad.
damn, like really?
Not good.
Oh
the
shit! Like if
craziest-
my daughter, you know, sorry to, you know, I just, you think about it. It's like if I had a daughter, it's like, and
The craziest part of that is like how many people have to approve it. Like when you start working in
so
television,
many adults,
How many adults?
so many
45
adults.
adults at
No,
least.
so
So
many
many
adults
adults.
approved that. So that's, it's like
45
there's no
adults.
spirit of responsibility towards children.
Right.
There's a spirit of like a bottom line.
There
financial
is a bottom line.
You know,
There's a bottom line, and then the things that weren't approved for the network were snuck onto like our website or whatever it was, and that is another discovery. But going into it, I guess I'm upset.
Yeah.
But you know, towards the end, my mom was allowed to come to set when I was like, you know, a little.
She
but,
wasn't allowed to come to set.
When we were younger, they were allowed to come to run through sometimes, or like things like that. Like occasionally, I think
That's crazy that they weren't allowed there all
towards
the
end, she was
time.
there like a little more, and we've been talking a lot about this recently, and she's been like,
That's
My
insane.
mom and I have
Yeah.
too, by the way.
yeah,
Well, because it's like,
it's awakening.
yeah, you have to start to process like, okay, so now knowing what we all know, neither would I want my children to be in an environment like that, nor does my mother in retrospect think that I should have been in an environment like
Right.
that. So
Oh, how many times do we hear this? Truly. It's like actors who were young actors who are having these conversations now, who are reckoning with the abusive environment that is Hollywood, are like, yeah, I shouldn't have been in that. I wouldn't want my kids to be in that. It's how did we survive? Like, how did we survive that? And it's why I stand by no child actors, no children doing internet creation,
you know, then how do we
no
kind
child
of reconcile around that
influencers.
as you know, for the sake of our relationship?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
how do you also like put it to use? How do we put it to use? How do we, how is there an end to things like this? I was actually talking about this with Max, who I said earlier, because I think that in my contract as a Republic Records artist, I want to see them add moving forward. I need to call Monty Libin about this. Monty, I have an idea. No, but I think it should be provided that if you're going to be doing this on this scale and your life is going to turn into something.
If you want child actors, you can only get adults who look like children, like the girl who The Orphan is based on. Okay? You need an 8-year-old? Great, you're getting a 30-year-old. She's 45. Yeah. That's if you want a real human actor. Otherwise, you get the AI. Yeah. Or the Bradley Cooper
But
baby.
you know it is if you do
Yeah.
it, if it goes well, and if you get to do it and you get to be on the stage at the Grammys, and you know your dreams are coming true.
I'll play a child.
There should be an element that is mandatory of
Yes.
therapy, of a professional person to
Yeah.
unpack what this experience of your life changing so drastically.
I will play a child. I had an audition sent to me recently for a Gen Z. It's close enough. Just Gen Z. That's what the character name was. It was Gen Z #1. Oh, it was so funny.
does to you at a young age, at any age. It's just
And like young
Really?
Gen Z.
Yeah.
gets you for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ariana, I want to say is completely sincere.
Anyway, this is wrapping up here. But the last thing that she said, where she's like, what this does to you at a young age. Bada bing, bada boom. And it's why when celebrities, you know, of course we need to criticize them, no worship. But it's also this understanding of celebrities who have been in the spotlight for so long and grew up in this environment. Of course they're screwed up. Of course, yeah, there's major problems. Of course, even if they're not like an Amanda Bynes. You know, I think this is a bad example of it. But like yesterday, how I started off on the stream talking about how it's hard to have conversations sometimes that you have in real life when you've got a camera on you, when you've got chat there. It doesn't go the way that it would go IRL. There's like this added element of like you are being perceived. All of these people are looking at you and interpreting it and then, you know, talking about it. And you translate that to like actors who grow up in the spotlight, like Nickelodeon kids who had to grow up in that environment, who were famous by double digits, you know, by the time they were 10 years old, and had to endure the growing pains of life, but under a spotlight. And I covered this when we covered Justin Bieber. It was the same thing. It's like, yeah, Justin Bieber did a lot of shit. Absolutely. A lot of shit. But you think about like some of the things that he did are things that kids do in life all the time. It's just that he had an enormous spotlight on him. Everything that he did was reported on by every fucking publication under the sun. And so there's no there's it's like you can't make mistakes.
Sincerely that meeting you now, I mean, you're just so lovely and kind and sweet. But even from afar, I just feel, and Penn, I've like had conversations with Penn about this, completely sincere. You're so strong. Like you've gone through some incredible things. And I just feel like grace has to be one of your lead attributes as a person. Like you seem to handle things with grace. Yeah.
That's nice. Thank you. You got me. Thank you. That's nice.
It's true. Yeah.
Thank you. I think everyone in this room is very strong.
Thank you.
And yeah.
You don't know them. You don't really know them.
I was only talking about. No, I'm kidding. No, but thank you.
Alrighty.